to the Patrick Netherton Show right here on 1130 The Tiger. Another scorcher out there, and so everyone please be careful. It is heat indices up over 100 again. Just be cautious while you're outside. That's why we're inside with our new shade over the window, so it's a little bit cooler in here. It's not normally 131 degrees in here. It's actually, I think, just 111, so it feels really nice in here. But a guy who also would encourage you to be careful of the heat because he has to be out in it probably more often than he liked to. The director of officiating for the Southland Conference, an NFL official in his own right, Byron Boston, joins us on the show. Byron, how are you, man? Everything good?
Everything's good, Patrick. Great to be with you.
Hey, it's fantastic to have you with us. Basically, I wanted to have you on, Byron, because as we know, every year the NCAA mandates new rules changes. The competition committee puts stuff in. Everything changes. And so we want to kind of highlight some of the big ones that people are going to see. So if you will, what are the major changes that you're looking at in terms of college football rules?
First of all, the rule change process is a 2-year rule change cycle, and 2019 is an off year, and basically what that means is you can only have changes regarding player health and safety, or a rule change from the previous season that didn't achieve the intent, or changes that have a significant impact on the image of the game. So for 2019, everything will be involving safety, and there are 5 basic rules changes that we need to discuss. The first one is targeting. The second one is the overtime scoring rule. The third one is the illegal wedge formation. The fourth is the blindside block. And the fifth one is blocking below the waist by the defense. So I will start out with targeting.
Yeah.
There have been several changes to the targeting rule. For those conferences that use instant replay, there's no longer an option of stands. The targeting foul will either be confirmed or reversed. If no element of targeting can be confirmed, the foul for targeting will be overturned. The elements of targeting are taking aim at an opponent for the purpose of attacking him with forcible contact with the crown of the helmet, or in the case of a defensive player, taking aim at a player for the purpose of attacking him with forcible contact to the head or neck area. Targeting indicators are launching, an upward thrust from a crouched position to attack an opponent in the head or neck area, leading with the helmet, forearm, shoulder, fist, hand, or elbow to attack with forcible contact to the head or neck area. Lowering the head before attacking by initiating forcible contact with the crown of the helmet. Targeting now encourages progressive discipline. And by that, I mean for the third targeting foul and any subsequent targeting foul in the same season, the player would be disqualified for the remainder of that game and an automatic 1-game suspension for the next scheduled game. For games without instant replay, which, of course, we have instant replay in the South,
right,
the conference has the option to consult with the national coordinator for video review.
Byron, is the suspension, so if you get called for targeting, you're ejected from that game. Is that still the penalty, or is that changed?
Well, the penalty has just been increased once you get the third and any subsequent targeting foul. So, in other words, if you have a targeting foul in the week 3 of the season, and
right,
it's the third one and it happens in the first quarter, you will be out the remainder of that game plus the entire game the following week.
So your first targeting infraction is no longer an ejection.
Targeting, it is an ejection.
Okay.
The rules have not changed. What they've done is add an additional progressive discipline to it. So
gotcha.
if you get one targeting foul in week 1, one targeting foul in week 2, then you have a normal discipline process depending on which quarter the targeting foul happens.
Right.
If it happens in the first half, then you're out for the remainder of that game. Happens in the second half, you're out the remainder of the second half of the game that you're involved in, plus the first half of the next game.
Right, so that hasn't changed. But then the third one...
Go ahead.
So the third one then becomes
what would happen is if you got it in the second half of a game, then you would be out the first half of the following game, along with an additional game the next week.
Okay, so that just adds an additional game penalty to the normal ejection process when you get your third. I got it.
Right.
And one of the things, and you know, we'll move on in just a sec, but one of the things about targeting is it's been so nebulous, and we've seen Devin White, the Mississippi State game. That's one of the ones that most LSU fans remember. But do you think that with this rules clarification that it's no longer, hey, it's going to stand, it's either going to be confirmed or overturned, Do you think that will make things a little bit more black and white for replay officials when they have to go look at the targeting penalty?
Yes, I think it will, Patrick, because targeting is such a punitive foul that they wanted to make sure that all the elements were there, and we had a lot of stands. But, in the replay process, you had 3 outcomes: stand, reversed, or confirmed, and 2 of them were bad for the student athlete. So depending on the quality of the video, the number of cameras that you had, stands carried the same penalty as a confirmation. So targeting will be the only replay situation where you will only have 2 outcomes instead of 3.
Gotcha. Okay. Then let's move on to the next major rule change that we're seeing in terms of player safety.
Overtime scoring is the next category. And beginning with the 5th overtime period, each team will attempt a 2-point try from the 3-yard line. After the 2nd and 4th overtime periods, there will be a 2-minute mandatory break unless there's a media timeout. And basically what they're saying is that instead of going 1st and 10 at the 25, like we do in the first 4 periods, beginning with the 5th period, we'll put the ball down at the 3-yard line. Each team has 1 attempt from the 3-yard line to score a 2-point conversion. If they make it, the other team doesn't, then the game is over.
Yeah.
If they make it, the other team makes it, then we continue to play. But each play from the 5th and each subsequent overtime period will be from the 3-yard line. It will no longer be a 1st and 10 at the 25-yard line.
Does that change in any way the ability, let's say they go for 2 and they throw a pick and the guy's going to score on the other end? That doesn't do anything. It's just a turnover, and they still have to go back out and attempt their 2-point conversion, correct?
All right, unless he scores, right? Yeah.
But if it is a pick 6, say, like they try to throw it in the goal line, he intercepts it, returns it for a touchdown. Does that end the game at that point? They don't have to then turn around
Absolutely.
and do their 2
Absolutely,
points.
Right.
Okay.
That ends the game, right?
Okay, cool. That's actually something I didn't know. So I like knowing. Do you feel like this is something that's going? I mean, we know that there's not a ton of games that go 5 overtimes. This is kind of this is more of the LSU Texas A&M rule at this point. Do you feel like that this is something that is it? I don't want to say it's an overreaction. I don't think that's the right word. But do you think it's almost something that they mandated that maybe didn't need to be mandated just because of how rare this occasion is?
Well, I think when you look at safety, what the Rules Committee was trying to do was to eliminate the number of plays in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go back to a 1st and 10 at the 25-yard line, then you have the potential to run 4 plays, get a first down, then you have an option for another 4 plays. So you could conceivably have 8 to 10 plays in each overtime period, the way that the rule was previously written. So what they're trying to do is just eliminate the number of plays, which would be a safety issue for the, this was basically brought up by the coaches. And it was certainly was a result of the A&M LSU game with the 7 overtimes last year.
Talking to Byron Boston, the director of officiating for the Southland Conference, and also does a little NFL officiating. By the way, is this your last year for the NFL officiating?
Yeah, right. This is going to be my last year.
Okay, well, look. Congratulations!
25th and last season.
Yeah, you've had a hell of a career, my friend. So congrats on that. All right. So one of the things that's kind of overlooked is the number of collisions and injuries that occur on kickoff and kickoff return, and that's why the wedge, the elimination of the wedge block in kickoff returns. I think that's something that maybe people don't appreciate enough is what happens in terms of blocking and contact on those kickoff returns. Tell me about the elimination of the wedge.
To give you a little background, the wedge penalty is basically...
The Starlight Lounge presents an evening...
To discourage the kickoff team from putting really big, fast players on their kicking team in an effort to go down and break up the wedge. So the theory being, if you don't have a wedge form, there's no need to put the big, fast players on to go out and create the really big collisions.
That makes sense.
And
go ahead.
And a wedge is a foul by the receiving team as soon as it forms. So there does not have to be contact with any player on the receiving team. So once they form the wedge, it is a foul immediately. A wedge is defined as...
Go ahead.
A wedge is defined as 2 or more players in line shoulder to shoulder within 2 yards of each other. and it's a foul after the ball has been kicked for two or more players to form a wedge for the purpose of blocking for the ball carrier. And the exceptions are a fair catch, a kickoff out of bounds, or a touchback. And it's not a foul if it's an obvious onside kick.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Patrick.
What's the penalty for that?
The penalty is 15 yards from the spot where the wedge is formed. If the spot is in front of where the dead ball spot is, it's penalized from the dead ball spot.
Wow. Look, they mean business if they're giving you 15 yards for forming the wedge. That's a heck of a penalty. All right,
that's a really big one.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, what's next, Byron?
Blindside block.
Oh, yes.
And a blindside block is an open field block against an opponent that is initiated from outside the opponent's field of vision. The defender must have a reasonable opportunity to defend himself against the block. Exceptions are the runner or receiver in the act of attempting to make a catch. If the blindside block is above the shoulder, it is a blindside block with targeting. So it's a really, really big difference this year. Blindside blocks are those blocks on punt returns, interceptions, quarterback scrambles deep into the backfield, and kickoff returns, where if you were to hit a player last year, shoulder to shoulder, shoulder to chest, it was a legal block. But now those blocks are illegal if there's forcible contact where the defender cannot defend himself or cannot see you coming to protect himself from the block. If it's above the shoulders, it's a blindside block with targeting, which carries an ejection.
Yeah, I actually talked with the officiating crew that was doing the Demon scrimmage last weekend, and they mentioned that you can still wall a guy off, you can still kind of get in his way, but when you go attack him, when you go hit him going back towards the line of scrimmage, if he's heading towards the ball and you're going away from the ball, you can still get in his way. You can still create that block, but you just can't go attack him forcefully. Is that right?
That is correct. Basically, what we are asking our players to do now is to basically shield a guy off, so you can run in front of him, turn your back to him, and accomplish the same thing. Because all you want to do is prevent him from getting to the ball carrier. So lots of players are just running in front, putting their hands up in the air so they don't have any force, and just train a guy off or run in front of him. You not necessarily have to contact him, make him go around you, which accomplishes the same thing as knocking him to the ground.
Yeah, and one of the things we know from watching football forever is that the hardest hits you see are those crackbacks where a guy doesn't see it coming, like you mentioned, on a punt return or an interception or whatever, and those are the ones that always get the sidelines fired up, but they're also incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely, and I think that's the big hit, what we used to call the old decleating block, is what used to make all the highlight tapes that you see on SportsCenter, but now those blocks will be illegal.
And then you also mentioned there's the penalty on defensive players for hitting low.
Well, there's always been a penalty for blocking below the waist on the defense, but it was not defined in the rule book. And basically all they did this year was clarify it, where that when the defense is legally able to block low, which is 5 yards either side of the line of scrimmage, those blocks have to be from the front. We always focused on offensive blocks having to be from the front, but there was nothing in the rule book that said defensive players had to block from the front as well. So they just clarified it and put that in the rule book. So if you see a defensive player within the same parameters as an offensive player, they have to initiate a contact in what we call the 10-2 position, which is from the front.
Is that something that happens a lot? Because it's not even anything that I think I've ever been aware of a defensive player going low on someone. I don't know that I've ever witnessed it, or maybe if I have, I haven't paid attention to it. Is that something that happens more regularly than I know?
Yeah, you probably haven't noticed. It happens a lot on screen passes where you'll have pulling guards coming out and defensive backs are coming up to take on the pulling guards. And they are taught to take that pulling guard out low, which is still legal within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
You just never noticed it because they're not the ball carrier, just a big guy and a little guy. But anytime you had a situation where there was a pulling guard and a defensive back coming up to take him on, defensive back always cutting.
Yeah, no, that actually, when you say that, it makes sense. I have seen that a ton. You just it's not something you necessarily and you typically call that a win for the offensive lineman because he's eliminated that guy from the play. Right. Typically, but it's still a dangerous play when someone's diving at your knees.
Right, absolutely. So if the block happens beyond 5 yards, then that same small defensive back would have to take that big pulling guard up high, so he can no longer cut him once he goes beyond 5 yards past the line of scrimmage.
All right. Byron Boston, Director of Officiating for the Southland Conference, and entering his last year as an NFL official. Overall, as you look through what they decided, and I know the emphasis is on player safety, and it always has been and always should be. How do you feel? Do you feel these were good rule changes? Do you feel like these are making progress in terms of, let's take the head hits, the concussions, let's try to take as much of that, the dangerous contact out of the game as we can? Do you feel like they're accomplishing that in the last several years?
I think they accomplished two things. I think they accomplished player safety with all these different rules changes, but I think they also made it better for the student athlete, where if there were plays that were gray and not simply black and white, this player did not lose an opportunity to continue participating in a game, because once they eliminated stands from the replay options on targeting fouls, it was a big win for student athletes, because once what a stands basically meant was we didn't have evidence either way, either to confirm or reverse.
Right.
So it was in that gray area, but that gray area carried the same penalty as a confirmation. So I think that was a big win for the student athletes without taking anything away from the emphasis on taking the head out of the game. And by making it a progressive foul, we gave a little bit on the replay options, but we also added a little bit by making the targeting foul a progressive foul as opposed to just a normal targeting foul where you could get and just a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 during the game, and you only have the normal penalty. So now once you get that third and any subsequent, you have an additional game. So that just certainly deter individuals from using their head in the game.
Yeah, punitive penalties do seem to work. Last thing for me, Byron, you mentioned that they also the committee will go through and rescind rules or take rules out that maybe they didn't think worked as well as they should have. Is there anything that you know of, or anything that we think of that got taken away that maybe we used to think was a rule but now is no longer a rule or a penalty?
No, not this year. Everything that we put in place last year is effective in 2019, and they'll take a look at that next year for the 2020 season. But there was nothing that they deemed appropriate to remove from the rule book that affected the image of the game.
There you go. Hey, that's why I love having you on, Byron. You bring us all the information. You get us all set up for college football. Now, hopefully everyone who's listening to this can be a more knowledgeable fan and go out there, and when someone's sitting next to you at the bar watching that game goes, man, they got to let that targeting stand, you can tell them exactly why they can't do that. And so that's what we have you on for, Byron. You're a great dispenser of information, and we certainly appreciate you.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
All right, Byron Boston, Director of Officiating for the Southland Conference. Great stuff.